After seeing Toy Story in the theater when I was 5, I remember going home and feeling really guilty that I had toys that were left unplayed with. Kids are like impressionable, thinking cartoons are real, ignorant. That didn't stop Disney from releasing tons of video games for the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis that, while good, would bust your balls. The fear of rentals eating sales because a game was too easy was rampant, but by the time the next wave of consoles hit, namely the PlayStation, Nintendo 64, and Dreamcast, the fear was gone. Instead, third parties tried to follow the footsteps of what was successful at the time. Since Mario 64 had become the standard bearer of 3D platforming, Traveler's Tales and Disney Interactive debuted Toy Story 2, Buzz Lightyear to the rescue. Presentation is the weakest and most noticeable aspect of Toy Story 2. The menu, level clear, and boss clear screens come off as cheap and lazy. Conversely, the overworld map is pretty neat, being made of an Etch-a-Sketch, even if it has color. Menus might not seem like a big deal, but for all the imagination that's in the Toy Story series and this game itself, they stick out like a sore thumb. Clips from the movie are interspersed throughout the adventure, and although they are compressed, they're still enjoyable. It's worth keeping in mind that this was considered a huge feature at the time, and while not impressive today, could have been considered a selling point. The rest of the game does fare better, though only so much. You can tell what and who every character is, and the environments that the game takes place in are reminiscent of the movie. Naturally, with it being a movie game, liberties were taken with level locales, and they work well. Notable scenes are expanded like Andy's house and Al's toy barn, but then areas like the alleyway are mostly dark, somewhat off affairs. You'll run into a lot of the same enemies throughout the game, and although there are certain area-specific foes, the same snakes and robots pop up constantly. And they aren't the only thing you'll hear a lot. Toy Story 2 came out in the thick of adding voices into a video game. Buzz himself has multiple lines he'll spout throughout the game, many of which are from the first movie instead of the second. Few, if any, were recorded just for the game, and you'll hear him drop the same handful of phrases over and over again. Buzz's friends aren't much different. You'll run into Rex, Potato Head, and Ham throughout the adventure, and they all make a point to shout Buzz every 10 seconds if you're in their vicinity. The music isn't much to write home about. The menu uses Randy Newman's music, and the rest tries to kind of play off it. Nothing in particular stands out, but it's also not bad either, it's just there. Taking inspiration from successful platformers like Banjo-Kazooie and Mario 64, Toy Story 2 is a collectathon. Each level has 5 different Pizza Planet tokens to collect with different objectives for each one, taking place of stars or puzzle pieces. One may assume that there's plenty of variety in said objectives, given the inspiration for this title. And you'd be wrong. Kind of. Each stage has players doing the same 5 things. Collect 50 coins and take them to Ham, find 5 different hidden objects or toys, defeat a boss, find the Pizza Planet token out in the wild or hidden by some puzzle, and then do some sort of race. While the objectives themselves don't mix things up too much, there is a decent amount of diversity in the levels themselves. The game touts itself as having 15 levels, but in reality there's 10 actual levels and 5 devoted strictly to bosses. Levels come in pairs and are based on parts of the movie. They do a good job in keeping with said movie, and manage to make something out of essentially nothing. While there are 5 tokens to collect per stage, you only need 1 to technically finish it. Similar to the games that Toy Story derives itself from, later levels are walled off if you don't have enough tokens, and frankly that shouldn't be too much of a problem. Most tokens aren't too terribly difficult to collect, and you can clear out most stages on your first go. Power-ups can be collected from Mr. Potato Head, and these do factor into some of the objectives, namely when you have to backtrack to levels later that require said power-ups. Most objectives don't require this, but they are there. For completionists, that can be an irritating constraint, though none of the power-up required tokens take long to complete. In fact, the whole game is fairly short and can be completed in an afternoon. The adventure isn't nearly as sprawling as others in the genre, but that works in its favor. No level overstays its welcome, usually, and the platforming is pretty fun. Combat comes in 2 different flavors, spinning Buzz with his wings and shooting his laser. That's right, unlike the movies, his laser actually works here. Obviously that doesn't fit in with the movies, but still, it's goofy and fun to use. Charging it gives a more powerful blast, not unlike Mega Man. Aiming isn't too tough, and there is an option for a first-person mode, though you likely won't be using this much since you can't move while using it. The biggest drawback is a common one for the time, the camera. In wider areas it works fine, but when levels get claustrophobic or Buzz has to move his back to a wall, it becomes a problem. It doesn't help that the distance you have to be to grab rails or beams varies from level to level. It's never consistent, and up until the end, I found myself having trouble making what should be easy jumps from pole to pole. Toy Story 2 Buzz Lightyear to the Rescue isn't the kind of game that set the world on fire. But at the same time, it's a fun little 3D platformer that gets overlooked because it's a movie-based game. You can get the PS1 version for $6 on the PlayStation Store. If you got a free afternoon, it's worth checking out for that price. Just maybe consider muting the TV when the cutscenes aren't playing.